I'm going to talk about reducing uncertainty of estimates by using measurements as well as observations, so data. That'll give us a little less it depends. So you're actually already doing this in IT as well as when driving down the road, or if you pilot an airplane, you collect measurements and observations which reduce your uncertainty. So you have MFA enforced. Okay, we know that this will reduce the probability of a loss event. You also have a segmented and filtered network that will reduce the potential loss of an event. Your SCADA system is accessible through VPN and multi-factor authentication, but only 16 hours yearly during 2 maintenance windows. Again, we reduce uncertainty with these measurements. So let's keep on going with Bo's example of the worn out tire. Let's ask, what can we measure to reduce the uncertainty of the risk? So if you'll bear with me, listen to these. The driver is inexperienced. The car is a new front-wheel drive Volvo. The road ahead is flat. It has 5 soft curves and 2 90-degree turns. The weather is relatively clear. There are no winds. The car has 2 equally worn front tires. The driver plans to go no faster than 40 kilometers an hour. The driver is 23. The driver is late for the final exams. The road underneath the ice is asphalt. So now we have a lot of measurements and observations, and we're able to reduce our uncertainty. But we're also approaching a saturation point where any additional measurements might not reduce our uncertainty in a meaningful way. Some observations and measurements are better than others. I look at the car and I see that all 4 wheels have snow chains mounted. Aha! This tells us something very specific about the risk with a high confidence level. Some of the other measurements seem rather irrelevant now. We would argue that with few measurements and observations, we are able to reduce the uncertainty of this until this saturation point, where any additional information is irrelevant. This means that we could save a lot of people a lot of time answering hundreds of difficult questions regarding security levels of their assets. Let me give you an example. Center for Internet Security is responsible for the SIS controls, some call them SIS 18, which you might be familiar with. They have identified 153 safeguards and spread them across these 18 controls. There is a lot of best practice, good ideas, and basic cyber hygiene in these sets of controls. They are ordered by importance, and you can group them according to your company size and type. I highly recommend using them. But you can't address them all first, and some might be irrelevant. The safeguard about protecting your Wi-Fi is irrelevant if you don't have Wi-Fi, but you still have to ask the question. So working with these SIS controls and other frameworks and standards for that matter is a good idea, but as a whole, it doesn't necessarily give you the best input for your risk assessment. A real-world example from a large organization, they have 2,000 systems, all with a system owner. Information security requires them to evaluate the 153 SIS safeguards for each system. Yes, some safeguards can be skipped if the system uses, for example, Active Directory, but it is still a full-time job answering these questions, as the company says. One of these safeguards from the SIS controls reads, uninstall or disable unnecessary services on enterprise assets and software, such as an unused file sharing service, web application module, or service function. That's a mouthful. To me, this is sound advice, absolutely. But it is difficult for an asset owner to answer with a high confidence level. Does he answer yes, no, or 3 on a scale from 1 to 5? Or does he answer yes on 72% of assets? Either way, he's spending a lot of time answering these questions. And who determines what an unnecessary service is? Well, it's just a difficult question to answer. Will these answers be of high quality and help reduce the uncertainty? That's 153 questions times 2,000 systems. I think that might be a no. I have a question which is much easier to answer and describes the risk level very well. Is the asset internet facing? So maybe you're thinking, what should I measure? Penetration tests, disaster recovery tests, multi-factor authentication deployment, awareness tests. And you'd be right. These are examples that could be relevant measurements for you. You need to spend some time with your experts to figure out which handful of questions are easy to answer with a high confidence level that explicitly describe risk. Find the questions that are as good as, are there snow chains mounted? That will help you reduce the uncertainty of your estimates, lower bound, upper bound, or both. So to summarize, you need to measure fewer important properties of an asset than you think. Measurements must be easy to answer for the right people. And they must tell us something very specific about risk with a high confidence level.